Hi everyone, today we're going to make Swiss meringue buttercream. We'll walk through every step into making a safe meringue for this buttercream, as well as fixing problems such as buttercream that is too grainy, curdled, or soupy. I am able to make many cakes for my friends and family, as well as donate plenty of cakes because I make this frosting ahead of time, so I will show you exactly how I do that and how I store this frosting. For the full recipe, you can visit my website, Tasty Pastry Kitchen, and what I have here is the full recipe for 3 cups of frosting. But if you need frosting for another type of cake, I will have a table here that will list the amounts of frosting that are required for different sizes of cakes. You can also visit my CAKECULATOR and choose your cake size and choose vanilla Swiss meringue buttercream here, and say if I wanted to make cupcakes, it will calculate the amount of frosting that you need for that particular. The first thing that we're going to do is to prepare a water bath. I happen to have a steamer that my mixing bowl fits right into, but maybe you have something else in your kitchen, and what you're looking for is a water bath where steam is going to rise up and touch the bottom of the mixing bowl. So maybe you have a pot that fits your mixing bowl perfectly. Just make sure that whatever you have, that the bowl is not sitting directly in the water. Bring your water up to a boil and then turn the heat down to a simmer. In a large mixing bowl or the bowl of a stand mixer, go ahead and add your egg whites, your granulated sugar, and your cream of tartar. Then add your pinch of salt and take your spatula and give your egg white mixture a good stir. You should notice that it's still really white, pretty viscous, and really thick. Now that the water is at a gentle simmer, we'll go ahead and add the meringue to the top. So I'm just going to put my steamer basket on top of this pot and then fit my mixing bowl right into that. Now we're going to cook the meringue, and we do this by gently heating it and stirring at the same time. For a fully cooked meringue, you will need a thermometer to check the temperature, although I know that some people like to use their fingers and they kind of feel the meringue to see if the sugar granules have been dissolved. And that method will definitely produce a meringue that you can whip up and use for buttercream. However, I personally never cook my meringue that way. I always raise the temperature to about 165 degrees Fahrenheit because that will limit the amount of bacterial contamination that could potentially carry over into your finished frosting. So I'm going to go ahead and test the meringue to see if there are any sugar granules left, and you can see on the thermometer that when I do this and no sugar granules remain, that the temperature is around 140 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. So not quite there yet, but if I just continue scraping the bowl and stirring, I'll find that my temperature will rise up to 165, so that's good. Now I'm going to carefully take this hot bowl over to my stand mixer. And then I'm going to whisk this on high speed with the whisk attachment for at least 10 minutes. The meringue will double in volume and will be very thick and glossy. At this point, it's very difficult to over whisk the meringue, and so I just let it go until it reaches room temperature. So here is the Swiss meringue buttercream after it's been whipping for about 10 minutes. Notice that it's completely balled up inside the whisk, and when I take a spatula and pull some of the meringue out, it's incredibly stiff and dense, which is exactly what we want. Now, even though the meringue is just the right texture for the buttercream, it is still a tad bit warm, so I'm just going to let it sit for a little bit until I'm ready to add the butter. When you're ready to add the butter, switch out the whisk attachment for the paddle attachment. This is important because the whisk attachment is specifically for incorporating air into batters and meringues and things like that. So we're done with that. We're ready to switch over to the paddle because we just want to smoothly incorporate the butter and limit the amount of air bubbles. This is going to help you later on when you frost your cake. It's going to limit the amount of those tiny little air bubbles that you see everywhere. Okay, so everything should be room temperature. Your meringue and your butter that's been cut into tablespoon-sized pieces. So go ahead and turn on your paddle attachment and then just start dropping in the butter one by one. And if you played this game right, meaning that your meringue was the right temperature and your butter was the right temperature, theoretically, at the end of adding in all the butter, you should get something that's very light and airy and that you can frost with. But I'm going to show you what happens when your meringue is too warm or your butter is too soft. Okay, so take a look at my buttercream now. Notice how it looks kind of grainy and almost broken, maybe somewhat curdled, and it's very loose. This is something that you would not be able to frost with, but it's easily fixed. All you have to do is take the bowl and place it in the fridge for about 10 to 15 minutes, or maybe a freezer for about 5 to 10 minutes. Wait for the bowl to get really cold and then bring it back out. So here's my bowl. It's super cold from the freezer. I put it in there for about 10 minutes with the paddle attachment. And notice how it's still kind of soft in the middle, but along the perimeter of the bowl, it's pretty cold, and the bowl itself is really cold. So that is actually going to make the butter become more solid. All we have to do now is blend it with the paddle attachment until it reaches that silky smooth consistency. So this step might take an additional 2 to 3 minutes depending on the temperature of your kitchen. But if you find that your buttercream is still kind of cold and chunky, what I do is often take my hands and rub it on the outside of the bowl, and the warmth and body temperature will essentially melt the butter a little bit so that it reaches that right consistency. And then at the very end, I like to add in my flavorings. So I'm going to make a vanilla Swiss meringue buttercream. So I just pour in a little bit of vanilla extract and then let that whip until it's super smooth, usually about 30 seconds more. And here's what it looks like going from that kind of too warm and slightly grainy mixture into something that's super smooth and spreadable. So the beauty of Swiss meringue buttercream is that you can make it ahead of time and you can freeze it. This is actually the only way I am able to make all the cakes I'm able to make. And what I do is make the Swiss meringue buttercream and then immediately put it into these deli containers. They hold about 4 cups of frosting, which is perfect for about 2.5 dozen cupcakes, or maybe a 2-layer cake, a 2-layer 8-inch cake, maybe a 2-layer 6-inch cake as well. And they are BPA free and freezer safe. And so I just have a stockpile of this in my freezer, and whenever I'm ready to decorate, all I do is move this into the refrigerator the night before, and then move that from the refrigerator to room temperature an hour before I plan to decorate my cake. Now I'm going to show you what buttercream looks like when you freeze it and refrigerate it. So here I have my cold Swiss meringue buttercream that I keep in my deli containers, and I'm going to put it into the bowl of a stand mixer with the paddle attachment. Remember, we don't want to use a whisk attachment. We're done with incorporating air. Now we just want a super smooth buttercream, because that's going to help us get those smooth surfaces when we frost our cakes. We're also going to turn the mixer on to low speed, because that's also going to limit the amount of air that we incorporate into the frosting. Now this is what Swiss meringue buttercream looks like when it's too cold. It looks very broken. It just looks curdled, and it looks kind of like a mess. It looks like you won't be able to work with it at all, which you won't be able to, but this is easily fixed as well. Just let the mixer keep running on low speed until the buttercream reaches a really smooth consistency. And like I said before, if it's not reaching, the temperature quick enough, just use your hands and rub the bowl, and it'll increase the temperature a little bit so that the butter melts more evenly. Mine took about 10 minutes to reach this consistency, but you see that if you let it run on low for long enough, it'll eventually look like this. It's super creamy and super smooth and ready to use. Now, if you enjoy learning from baking videos like this, go ahead and join me by subscribing, and you can check me out on Instagram and look at all the cakes that I actually make with this Swiss meringue buttercream. Thanks for watching and have a great day.